Good evening, everyone. My name is Kenji Friday. I'm the Public Relations Director. Just wanted to welcome you all here tonight. We have a great program planned with lots of great panelists. We hope that you all are engaged just as much as we are. We had a great time planning this program and do hope that you all enjoy, and we'll get started now. Thank you.
Thank you, Kenji. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for attending the Fischler School of Education Student Government Association's Graduate Student Alumni and Faculty Gathering. I would also like to thank Kappa Delta Pi International Honor Society and Phi Gamma Sigma International Professional Society for partnering with FSC-SGA to make this event possible. The list of Phi Gamma Sigma, Kappa Delta Pi, and FSC-SGA Executive Board members is included in the items that you received during your registration. We would also like to recognize the NSU Alumni Office, FSC Teacher Imaginarium, and Dr. Maria Grethel Mendez for graciously donating gift baskets to be raffled off this evening. Thank you. Before speaking about the future of FSC-SGA, I would like to take a moment to remind you of the Fischler School of Education's mission statement. The Abraham S. Fischler School of Education is dedicated to the enhancement and continuing support of teachers, administrators, trainers, and others working in related helping professions throughout the world. The school fulfills its commitment to the advancement of education by serving as a resource for practitioners, both novice and experienced, and by supporting them in their professional self-development. Because of its commitment to the working professional, the Fischler School offers alternative delivery systems that are adaptable to practitioners' work, the schedules, and locations. School programs anticipate and reflect the needs of practitioners to become more effective in their current positions, to fill emerging roles in education and related fields, and also to prepare, accept changing responsibilities within their own organizations. In the year of 2013-14, FSC-SGA participated in 5 NSU activities, including Sharkapalooza, Homecoming, the Student Leadership Conference, and Community Fest. Our executive team is also working hard this year to apply the mission statement of the Fischler School of Education and establish a legacy. The current FSC-SGA Legacy Project is the FSC Distance Education Museum. It will display technology-related items and recognize innovations in distance education. Plans currently include displaying these items virtually with integration into the FSC Distance Education Cafe. The museum will feature awards given to Dr. Abraham S. Fischler, FSC students, alumni, and faculty from leading global educational institutions, as well as recognize achievements in the academic innovation. In collaboration with the Alvin Sherman Library and the Abraham S. Fischler School of Education, the FSC-SGA will display this extensive collection in an interactive online experience. The museum will use social media to facilitate sharing content linked to descriptions, significance, recipient names, photos, and videos. The FSC Distance Education Museum content will be available online in the near future at FSC Shark Sources Social Studies Resource Center. The FSC Shark Sources Social Studies Resource Center has a feature that allows content, contributions, and recommendations. Plans also include developing a fund for individuals and organizations to donate monies to be able to support the museum's perpetual growth. Please watch for news about a ribbon-cutting event in March of 2015 to celebrate the grand opening of the FSC Distance Education Museum. On behalf of FSC-SGA, I would like to give special thanks to the following organizations and individuals for their dedication and donations to make this event and the FSC-SGA's Legacy Project a reality. The members and officers of the FSC-SGA, Kappa Delta Pi, and Phi Gamma Sigma officers. Dr. Abraham S. Fischler, Dr. Ron Chennai, Dr. Daniel Markarian, Dr. Michael Simonson, Mrs. Linda Stark, Mr. Steve McCrae, and Dr. Richard Peretz. I will now pass the microphone over to Judith S. Stein, Executive Director of the National Institute for Educational Options at the Abraham S. Fischler School of Education, to talk about the purpose of the event connecting students, alumni, and faculty.
Good evening. On behalf of Dr. Ron Chennai, our Dean, and the faculty, staff of Fischler School of Education, I am honored to welcome you to this event. I am an executive director of the National Institute for Education Options. I've been there at Nova for 15 years after leaving the Miami-Dade School District, where my career was 21 years as the Magnet School Director. I'm very honored to be able to welcome you for the purpose of this event. I hope you received a copy of an article that I had copied. If you did not, I will get it to you. It is the article that was in the Sun Sentinel on January 5th, 2014, commemorating our 50th anniversary. This article says, Nova built on innovation. And I think that says it all. Nova was built on innovation. In 1964, on a wing and a prayer, this university began. I think that we are very lucky to have had such innovation in Broward County, which has spread to the entire world. The picture on this program shows the first office on Las Olas Boulevard in Fort Lauderdale. It's just a building where they put the word Nova University, and it was for advanced technology. Even back then, we didn't have that much technology, but they were very forward-thinking. It also shows you the first marine science building, and now we have a magnificent multi-million-dollar marine science school. So this is really something that took tremendous innovation and risk-taking and entrepreneurship. If you look at the book, which is the history of Nova's University, and hopefully you will look at it from 1964 to 2014, when you go into the index and you look up Abraham Fischler, there are 7 pages of Abraham Fischler's accomplishments in this book. And you look and you say, what does it take to be a founder? Well, it takes a lot of courage, a lot of risk-taking, and a lot of ability to see the future. Dr. Fischler was at Harvard. Dr. Fischler was at Stanford. Dr. Fischler was at every Ivy League school. He was a science teacher. He was a professor. He could have stayed there and had a great career. He didn't have to come to the backwoods of Fort Lauderdale and develop a university. That took tremendous courage. And I hope you students, and I don't see that many students, I wish I saw more, I hope you students realize the legacy which you are inheriting from this man and what he accomplished. I reread the book last night because I knew I had to bring welcome for Dr. Chennai, and I said, my goodness, this whole university for 20-some years rode on the back of Dr. Abraham S. Fischler.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, friends, distinguished guests. As you all know, it's a real honor to stand here and say a few words to celebrate the achievements and influence of a visionary and a hero, seated right here. As you know, Dr. Abraham Fischler is one of the nation's most admired leaders in education. From 1959 in Berkeley, Columbia, and Harvard, leading all the way here with his outstanding leadership skills to build Nova Southeastern University into one of the foremost universities in this great nation. His innovative and creative approach in so many areas and his pioneering in distance education, transforming education and concepts such as the student is the class. His visions and implementing them is an inspiring, essential necessity, especially in STEM education. I've had the privilege of interviewing Dr. Abe Fischler for many years, 35 just about. And back then, he was a visionary as well, of course, and he would say, when the computers first came out, he said, there should be a PC or an Apple on every desk for every student. And as technology moves forward, so does Abe. And recently, he spoke at the FETC conference earlier this year in Orlando, and he said to an audience, every student should have a device, whether it's an HP tablet, an Apple, or whatever, and be able to research and study and interact with their teachers from any location. Always innovating, our dear Abe Fischler. Abe has not only had a profound influence on education in general, but also on a personal basis. My close personal friend, my children are at Nova, have been at Nova. My wife just graduated. In fact, we had the privilege. Abe actually hooded my wife, who just graduated last year as a doctor. Finally, what I'd like to say is, what is a great leader in any area without a supportive family? So I'd like us to recognize Shirley Fischler. Let's give a big round of applause. And of course, the entire Fischler family and all good friends who've been standing at his side throughout these years. To conclude, the best hope humanity has for a brighter future in a world so distracted by irrationalism, fundamentalism, obscurantism, and so forth, is for intelligent, benevolent, inspiring solutions in the world to prevail. And this depends on improving and transforming education. Ladies and gentlemen, our friend, Dr. Abraham Fischler.
I don't know what to say after all these speakers. I'll take only a few minutes because they gave me a topic to talk about the litigation of Nova University and North Carolina way back in 1983. But I want to put this in a context so you begin to realize that when one innovates, there's a pressure for conformity. And it's not easy to move outside of the box because the box has sides and tops and bottoms and all kinds of pressure to remain in the box. And so the struggle when you create something different and make change, you're bound to get groups that push back. We had some great news just 2 nights ago when ARCA, which is the group that accredits hospitals and suggests to the state that it's all right if the hospital is formed and built, just recommended us so that we could have a hospital on our campus. But there is a 20-day appeal process, and I'm sure that one of the institutions in the vicinity of this institution will file an appeal, and that will take another period of time before we win the final approval. So when one looks at what I tried to do was to say that public education fails a good many children because time is fixed. We think we know how every child learns. It's teacher-directed, Therefore, for children that don't fit the mold, don't come with the background necessary, it becomes a failing experience, a low self-concept, and they drop out. And now we're beginning to put in schools for children aged 15 to 22. Why 15 to 22? Because the legal age to drop out of school is 16. And so the minimum age is 15 to get into these new schools. Why do we need them? We need them because the box remains fixed. And when you want to change that box to move into something else, the pressure is to remain within what everyone is comfortable with. And so we go to school 10 weeks or 10 months. We give final exams on Friday so teachers could read them and get them back to the students on Monday. And everything remains time-bound. And so it was necessary to look at programs, even at the doctoral level, that allowed students the time to gain what they came to get and to encourage them to continue to work until they achieve what they really needed to become productive PhD students. So with NOVA, I had the opportunity of putting into focus a way of educating students who already are educated, who had master's degrees, to have an opportunity to get EDD degrees in a time independent, but exposed to the greatest teachers in the country. And because of my own background, I was able to recruit people from Harvard and Berkeley and Stanford and other places to come and fly on a Friday night and teach all day Saturday, 8 hours, and then get back on a plane on Saturday night to go home. Or they did us a favor and stayed over so they could have breakfast on Sunday morning and get on a plane Sunday afternoon to get home. In the meantime, they had dinner when they arrived on Friday night, had breakfast with another group, taught all day, had dinner with them again, and flew home. And they were exposed during that period of time for 3 months to the most outstanding professors that one can find in each of the fields. And we spared no money and worked with them so that they had the opportunity to use the summer to come in with their projects. So they had all that extra 10 weeks to do that. And we had them into a summer institute where they also formed national clusters. So for the solid 8 days, with their national clusters, there was intermixed with students that came from all over the country. And they were exposed to a different set of professors, so they were exposed to other types of people that made contributions. And I thought that it was better than the programs we created at Harvard, more diversified than we had at Berkeley. And NOVA gave me the opportunity to start an institution at the PhD level and EDD level. And we were going to be the MIT of the South, but I couldn't recruit a physicist to leave Harvard and come here, or Stanford, or any place else. We had no building to put him in. And so the goal that the founders really wanted to do could not be done with no money, no buildings, and no great people around. And these great people were not about to leave their institutions. In fact, my friends thought I was out of my mind to give up a full professorship at Berkeley and come to a ball field, which was a landing touch field for the Navy. So they took off at Homestead and touched down here, and they went on to north or west, and then they went back again. And so they learned how to land planes before they went out onto the carriers. And this gave me the environment to bring what I had learned in the various other institutions to implement the distance education program. So we recruited 25 or 30 people into clusters. A cluster consisted of about 30 students, somewhat homogeneous because they were either principals or directors or things like that within the public school system. And they were exposed over a 3-year period, every 3 months to another area, but they had the balance of the summer to finish whatever they had to finish in order to get from incomplete to completes. And they operated in two forms. One, the knowledge base, and two, the practicums. We call them major research projects, or MARPs. And that's consisted of 3 levels. In the first year, they had a small one to demonstrate that they knew how to do research and how to write, etc. The second year, they could work with a colleague on a larger project. And the third year, they, of course, worked on their own and had an opportunity to take the balance of their classes. And we gave them a 4th year to finish at no tuition. So it was a 3-year program, but you had a year's extra time to finish. And that was important for them because they needed the extra time to complete what they had done in the 3rd year and write it and get it approved and go through the machinery to get the degree. In the middle of doing this, in operating in 32 different states and 10 foreign countries, it took till about '83 before we began to have an impact. We started in '71 when we moved through this type of evaluation, because in every state we had to file as a foreign corporation to do business in the state, and no state wanted us. But in the beginning, they trusted a few of us, and we were able to implement within the state. But when it came to North Carolina, the person in charge of North Carolina said to me, "Abe, if it had to be get done, we'll do it for ourselves, you can't come in." And when he said that to me, I flew personally to see him, and we had a dialogue, and I walked out gaining no acceptance. And so I decided the time had come for me to take Nova and take the state into court. And it was interesting because I had to have a lawyer from this area and a lawyer that I hired from Washington, D.C., and then I had to hire a lawyer in North Carolina. So we had 3 lawyers and no money, but we did it. And we did it because it was the right thing to do. There were other institutions that were beginning to move out of the box, and bad enough in your own state, at least they gave you some leeway, but when you went into a foreign state, meaning Georgia for Florida, it became a problem because they didn't want you either. And so some way we had to get out of the box. And so we went into court. We exposed some of our professors to the judges. We also had students coming in who had been with us previously. And we showed them the products that were being produced and the changes that were being made. And surprise to my colleagues and surprise to educational leaders, we won. And North Carolina said, as long as they have this quality, and it's been passed by the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, you will not be able to keep them out. And we already had a cluster going. And Gordon Sweet, who, by the way, was a director of higher education in Southern Association, he was really a friend, good friend, but he told me, no more, Fischler, no more litigation. But I was about to take Texas into their courts because we had signed an agreement in Texas that we would only have 1 program in each of our 3 programs, 1 for public education K-12, 1 for higher education, and a DPA, Doctorate in Public Administration. And I said, fine, we'll only have 1 of each of those in Texas. I figured it was a big enough state that if we had 3 clusters going in Texas, it would be fine. Well, we finished 1 cluster in Dallas, and we opened up in Galveston. Next thing I knew, I got another letter. You can't go to Galveston. I said, went back, why, back and forth, and they finally said to me, if you stay, we're going to have to go to court. So I called Gordon Sweet, good friend, needed him. He said, if you don't do something and you go to court, we're not going to continue to support you. Without the Southern Association support, we would have never gotten anywhere else. And so I decided that it would be better to go back to Dallas. So I had to fly on a Saturday morning, 25 students from Galveston to Dallas, taught them all day, and then flew them back, and had to make library arrangements both in Dallas, but I also had to make library arrangements in Galveston because that's where they were living, and that's where they were working. But I did that primarily because Gordon didn't need another fight. And then gradually, when I got to know Gordon even better, I found out that he had received a letter from North Carolina saying that if you allow him, Nova, to continue to do what they're doing, we're going to drop out of this association. And when that letter was given to him, he decided he couldn't continue to support us as we were fighting. So that's how we ended up becoming place-bound in Texas. And when we finished, we had to only go into Dallas with the EDD and Ed leaders. We could go, I forget where we were with the higher ed one, and I forget exactly where we were with public administration, but we couldn't move from those 3 locations, even though we had an agreement prior to that, that if we finished, we could open up only one cluster, but it could be elsewhere. That we couldn't do. So the struggle wasn't easy. And obviously with a university that was struggling in other areas as well to get the resources necessary to improve the science offerings that we had, and to maintain a campus, to build some buildings like this one, was not an easy process. But thanks to those that were here at Nova, what I learned was each one had to have ownership of their own area. And so my style was not to interfere with what they had as an owner of a class, of a group, of a program. That was theirs. And I used to hold the deans responsible for just 2 things: the quality of their program and the economic viability of their centers. And by the time I retired in '92, we had 17 smokestacks, 17 centers operating in that model, where the only interference from the central administration was 2 meetings a month, one for finance and one for quality. But within that categories, both categories, they could do what they needed to do, and the budgets were built from the centers up to me. And then we would argue and debate how much money we could give for raises, if at all. And thanks to the banking system that we developed, the relationship with that system, each of 4 banks were able to pick up my problem on the 29th of a month, and I'd call them up, and they say, "Gee, it's good hearing from you. What do you need?" And it worked. I didn't do this by myself. A lot of people came and worked with us, cooperated with us, took ownership of their areas, so I didn't have to worry. And there were only 3 of us in the central administration: myself, the vice president for finance, and the vice president for development. And it was an easy way to operate a university, and it gave me time to work outside the university to be able to bring resources in, so that now, at this particular time, I can tell you that our budget is approximately $800 million a year. The satisfaction I get really from the students who graduate from the institution and go on to get good positions in other institutions and make contributions for the improvement of public education, both at the higher levels and now K-12. So what you see are little quotes from books. You're free to take one with you. I signed 100 of them, so you can have one. And I appreciate you coming today. And I thank my family sitting there for putting up with me and for being my support system when I needed it.
I think the next part of this show is where do we go from here? I mean, Dr. Fischler has been a pioneer in higher education, but one of his efforts when he went onto the school board was to say, I brought innovation into higher ed. What can we do through K through 12? So we've invited Dennis Uzenis, Miss Lara. Could the panelists please come to the front? That's Jamie Torres. We've got a list of them up in the front here. Matt Blazek. My name's Steve McCrae. I had the pleasure of walking into Dr. Fischler's office 5 years ago and saying, have you ever heard of this guy? I showed him a book by Littke. He said, no, but have you ever read my blog? And I said, no. And so after reading his blog, I basically said, I want to be a foot soldier in this man's army. And I soon realized that he wasn't going to be at the front. This general was not marching anymore. And so he's basically calling on all of us to take leadership roles in some way. So I've identified these people as some of my mentors, and I hope that they will take the time now to take turns. I don't know who wants to start. Dennis, you want to get started?
Thank you all for coming. I am a product of Novi Southeastern University. I started when it was NOVA. I just got out of jail. It's great. That was a joke. I got my master's here, and I became a project-based teacher at that point. And I had no idea that everything I'd been doing so far was just so futile and ridiculous. And now I feel that I'm doing futile and ridiculous stuff still. We are fighting a great fight right now, and that fight is we've had over 10 years of FCAT, and the FCAT has absolutely gutted education. I cannot tell you how unprepared, how ill-prepared my students are. I teach at Oxbridge Academy in the Palm Beaches. It's a hoity-toity school. It was started by one of the Koch brothers, okay, the good one, if there is one. And yeah, Bill is wonderful. He really is. He's very concerned. He's committed. He's got 4 of his kids at our school, and we are project-based 100%, and it's hard. It's hard because it's too easy to fall back in the old ways of doing things. It's too hard to find somebody that is actually project-based qualified to come in and teach at your school. There are times when you have to do a little bit of guerrilla teaching in spite of other things that are happening around you. Before I was at Oxbridge, I was at a place called Bach Middle School of the Arts. It's a middle school. I helped start that school as well in the middle of Palm Beach County. And that school is the second highest performing school in the state of Florida. We were project-based all the way. For 15 years we did this. Nobody stopped by and said, what are you doing that is so, and when I'm saying how do we rate it, second best across the board on FCAT scores. And we were not teaching to the test. We were not doing the FCAT stuff that the publishing companies would send you, the drill and kill manuals. There's an awful one from AMSCO. We were not using any of that material. It was all about getting kids involved in the art, getting them involved in serious projects, mastery teaching. The same kind of things that Dr. Fischler and Steve have been talking about for years. That's what we got involved in. And it works, that's what I know. And I'm not going to hold off any longer. Matt, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Matt Blazek. I teach at Boca Prep International School, so it's a small private school in Boca Raton. I've been there for a few years now, and one of the key differences is now that I'm at that school, we work with International Baccalaureate, and in that program, especially, except for the last 2 years, there's a lot of flexibility in teaching methodology, and so I've been able to just adopt a system within the IB where, yeah, we have our topics, we have our focus, but how I'm going to assess them, we have the time, we have the flexibility, or you can design the flexibility at least, to use a project to and have it assessed in unique ways. And I like to really incorporate technology. I'm actually in charge of the technology at the school. And so a lot of my projects get kind of different, but they provide a lot of different opportunities for a student to take control of their learning. I don't know how many of you are on Twitter, but my high school students, they probably spend more time on Twitter in a day than I have in 5 years. And it's something, it's their way of communicating. They have a phone in their hands all the time. So why not take advantage of it and design a curriculum where they're going to learn content, they're going to master the information that they need to be successful with the technology that they use. Twitter's a beautiful thing because it requires you to be extremely concise in your communication. And it's a skill that's difficult to master. So designing projects where you need to take a speech, perhaps Martin Luther King and I Have a Dream, and just get it down to what are the key 140 characters in that speech. The ability to understand and comprehend, to work through issues is really fun and unique, and that's something that we can do. We also, with the International Baccalaureate, part of the middle years program, which is the 6th through 10th grade, to complete the 10th grade, we require what's called the personal project, and it's great because they learn the process of doing research, but they get to pick what they're going to do the research on. It's not bound by any subject, but they still get to learn all the key skills. And the other beautiful thing with the projects is, even if it's not bound by a subject, maybe it can actually cover 3 or 4 courses at the same time. So instead of overwhelming students with 5 or 6 different assignments, they get one assignment that can be assessed in so many ways that it can cover their curriculum for multiple courses. And so having the structure with projects and having the freedom to use them has really been advantageous in that area. And that's kind of how I like to view the design and projects.
Hi, good evening. My name is Roberto Rodriguez. I'm a dance teacher, classical ballet. How I'm going to use this with dancers that they're not allowed to use any iPod, iPhone, whatever they have. But we have to incorporate technology into the dance classes also. How I do it especially in my dance history class. Not in the dance class, like the technique class, because they cannot use anything. They have to, the whole body with the leotard tights, ballet shoes, and hair in a bun for the girls. The boys have to get very well dressed also. But anyway, when we do choreography in the class, that's when we use technology, because we bring the kids, we allow the kids to have the iPhones or iPads to research for music, for the dances that they are creating in the dance class. But that's only a unit in the class. During the whole year, they cannot use it. But in my dance history class, that's when I incorporate this Streamline project. And I know that history is always like an arid thing for kids to understand, to know where was the starting point of what I'm doing right now. So I motivate my kids as asking them, what is your interest right now of knowing about history? Let's start from there. You're going to bring your iPhones, or you're going to bring your iPads, and you're going to use your computer V1, and we're going to research inside the classroom everything related what you want to know now. What period of time, if you have the opportunity to be in a movie that I'm going to create, what kind of movie you would like to be part of? Medieval ages, modern ages, it could be prehistoric ages, whatever. In the bottom, you're going to see what their interest in that moment. On the top, all the units that we cover from the beginning of September until now. We took the prehistoric times until the Romantic era in dance. And the only thing that I have to say right now, I asked my students to write something about this experience. And I asked them 2 questions. How does timeline exercise help you understand dance history better? Second, how do these events motivate you to learn more about dance? I'm going to read this one by Marie Callahan. She's a senior student from our school, Miami Art Charter School. This school only has 5 years of existence. It's a charter school. We don't have anything there, even textbooks. Okay? So we try our best to motivate the kids as much as we can, because as a teacher, when I decide to be a teacher, I said to myself, every year you're going to receive a different kind of group. Not all of them are going to be the same, because they change. Things that you used the year before does not apply for the new kids that are coming this year. So you're going to have to be very creative as a teacher. And when you don't have nothing in your hands, what you have? Probably the technology that they have, because probably we don't have books, but they have iPads and they have iPhones. So we have to use them. And me as a teacher, I'm a motivator. I am not just a guide. That guy. That's it. I'm going to read this by Nick Callahan, and I think that resumes everything that they have learned in these last 3 or 4 months. By organizing the dance history timeline with my classmates, it has helped me to understand the relation between people and culture. Since each of us got to research a country we were interested in, it was an easier transition to start a history class. When we share the information we research with each other, I gained a greater perspective of how the world shares a common art. The dance timeline shows not only when dance began being documented in certain parts of the world, but also the purpose behind the movement. For example, belly dancing began in India in 1500 before Christ, as a spontaneous dances done at fertility rituals. By the 10th century after that, dance included more organized step when the Slavic tribes moved to Russia and folk dances began. Today, dance is either practiced or performed spontaneously or with specific steps. The timeline helps me recognize why people today move the way they do, by taking elements from a variety of cultures. These events motivate me to learn more about dance because I want to find the origins of some of my favorite styles. Since I researched dance in Russia, I learned that dance used to be an activity for the lower classes. Typically, upper classes watches performance rather than participate. Years later, the ballet russe involved Russians folk dances and music into the pieces, or dancing. Eventually, classical ballet entered Russia as an idealized way of behaving. So when I do ballet now, I can think about the social transition it had to go through in order to be recognized and appreciated as an art. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jaime Torres, and I work in the same school that he does, Miami Arts Art School. So now picture those kids come into a math classroom, right? Yes, that's usually what I see. Math is the last thing in their mind. So as Mr. R said, we teachers here in the school have to be creative. The way that I've been able to teach math in the school to kids who usually are not interested in it is by using the time is a variable. What I do is, because a lot of our kids are more interested in auditioning and going to auditions, going to competitions, we give them kind of like deadlines. Yes, time is a variable, but it's not infinite. And so we have to tell them, okay, by this time, you have to be covering this much material. It is up to you. I'm here to help you. I'm here to guide you. I'm here as a mentor. But you have to come to me and say, I need help on this. During the class time, we do have little teams where they go in and they get together and they discuss things. And I go around asking them, okay, what do you need help on? So it's more like a one-on-one individualized teaching. Yeah, there is teaching as a whole class, but mostly it becomes individualized as a student. The student, like is saying here, is the class. Because again, some of our students are different in their skills. Some of them are more advanced. Some of them are more in the lower side of practice time, so they get either to practice or they get to move ahead. At the same time, we do mastery. A student is not allowed to go into the next section until he has proven to me that he deeply understands the concept. The way I do my assessment is no longer just by paper. They have to do projects, they have to do presentations, they have to do videos, and that's the way that I kind of assess whether they have mastered the concept in order for them to move on to the next level. The also thing is, when they do project-based, it's not me telling them, you have to do this. We cover the material, and they have options, and those options are based upon what they're interested in. So if they're a dancer, in geometry, for example, they can design a set, they can design a studio, they can design a theater with everything that they want, but at the same time, again, they have to use the math that they have learned in the classroom. So basically it is motivation, motivate what they're interested in, give them time to work at their own pace, but obviously make sure that you're helping them, and let them be their own educators to take like they say, take time, take also apprentice of their own education. And so you're not just shoving it down their throat, is, okay, I'm interested in this, and this is what I'm going to do.
Good evening. I'm here to give you a different perspective. I'm a director of education and lead principal of Sunnet High School, a program for students who are 15 to 22 years old, as Dr. Fischler said. We run a program that is online, basic curriculum, blended with project-based learning, as well as direct instruction pullouts. I want to commend all the teachers that are up here and their principals for allowing them to be creative in how they work with kids. That part is really, really important, and the reason why is in today's society, a lot of principals deal with parameters that they cannot go beyond, or they think they cannot go beyond. So I want to address something that this gentleman said a little while ago about the FCAT. If we think about it, the FCAT is nothing but the standards. What are we here to teach? We're here to teach kids the standards. And there are so many ways to teach kids standards. The best way is to teach them how to find things out by themselves. And that's exactly what they're doing. Because if you teach them how to answer those why questions, they'll carry those for the rest of their lives, no matter what they're doing. So it's not just about teaching them the FCAT, it's about teaching them the standards, which brings us to project-based learning. I encourage my teachers to find great ways for kids to learn. Because I have a program that is run for 15 to 22-year-olds, most of my kids have struggled through the traditional high school. They don't fit in the parameters a lot of principals give their teachers. So the first thing as a principal and director of education, my first rule is make sure my teachers know that I support them in what they do, and that I'm giving them the training to be able to go out there and find the answers as to how they need to teach it for these kids to get it. And that's why I said it's very important that their principals are supporting them. I have a lot of friends who are principals. They went through school with me. We think very differently, many of us. Many of us have gone through programs and had mentors ourselves that told us, teach to the test. You have to teach to the test. You have to get the right scores. But if we don't teach these kids how to find their answers, that test is going to do nothing for them when they leave school. It's going to do nothing for them when they get into college and they don't know how to research. It's going to do nothing for them when they can't write a paper talking in their own words about a topic. So teaching to the test is absolutely the wrong thing to do. Please, please, please get that word out there if you know anyone. So at my school, I have a young man here, Johnny Soto. He is one of my students. I have two campuses, one in Oakland Park, one in Margate. And Johnny's been working very closely with a young man who walked into my office back in July. Steve McRae walked into my office in July and sat down in front of me and started talking to me. And I remember him very, very well the day I hired him because he walked into my office and plopped about 6 books on my desk as soon as he walked in. And they were the books, some of them were Dr. Fischler's books. And he talked to me immediately about project-based learning. And he told me a little bit about his background and what he'd gone through with different principals. And we talked very openly for about 2 hours, I would say. I don't think it was an interview, I think it was more of a conversation. And before he walked out of my office, for the first time in the 10 years that I've been a leader, I hired him that day. And I have not regretted it one moment because he has brought tremendous life to my building. We kid around because Steve makes a mark no matter where he goes. And it's because he lives and breathes the Fischler way. He believes so much in project-based learning and working with kids to find their own answers that he posts those questions all over our building, and then we send somebody behind him to organize him. It's kind of a running joke in both buildings because now we have him traveling back and forth and making sure that he's touching the lives of all of our kids. Now, I told you before I run a digital program as well. We have an online core curriculum that we work with. Every student works off of a computer as well. And Steve is now bringing Skype to our building so that we can speak internationally to other students. And we can be able to help other students learn English as well as teach them a little bit about the cultures that are happening within our building. And I know that Johnny's very excited about that as well. So I'm not going to keep talking and talking. I want you to hear from somebody who's experiencing it firsthand. Johnny took time today to come and talk. And I have to tell you, since Steve has come into our building, so many of our students have been positively affected by him as well as the rest of the staff. We are all taking on this charge to help students in today's society find the answers themselves. And I want to tell you one more thing before I give Johnny the mic. I am a product of Fischler School of Education. I went all the way. Thank you very much.
Good evening, my name is Johnny. I'm from Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. And I just want to start off by saying, before I came out here to Florida, I was a little nervous about going to school because I ain't know nobody. So when I first walked into school, I had my head down. I didn't know what else to do. Then I walked into my teacher, Mr. Steve, and he encouraged me to open up a little bit and not to be afraid, to talk like I am now. But today I have brought this project in because, see, a lot of people don't listen to rap music, and it's because, they'll hear violence or people doing drugs or people doing other things. But I brought you guys today Jada Kids because his real name is Jason Phillips, and I want to talk about him because, see, in his songs, he wants to talk about how a lot of kids are struggling and how when going to school and having good teachers like Mr. Steve sit there and encourage you to do good things, we come out doing projects like this and explaining to the world why rappers are not all bad. Not all rappers are bad. I'm a rapper myself. Let me talk a little bit about this. For those that don't know who this is Aaliyah. Aaliyah had died in a plane accident. This is Jada Kid's actually favorite singer. And I'm gonna hold it like this, you guys don't mind. Okay. Jada Kid's expressing himself about how he felt about life. In other words, why hate? Because some people have more than others, or even have a gift that they can't share because others are favored. So, right here, this is Jada Kiss's lyrics. And I would like to read this to you guys so you guys can understand what he said in the song. He said, why they gotta open your package and read your mail? Why they stop letting brothers get degrees in jail? And why you gotta do 85% of your time? And why do rappers lie 85% of their rhymes? And that comes from everybody making music sound like it's all about violence. It's not about violence. It's more about expressing your feelings, because that's what I do with my music. When I can't, like right now, I have a hard time with speaking in front of everybody. With my music, I'm able to talk to you guys and express myself in those ways. You know, Jadakiss has inspired me for about 8 years now. And I remember when I was in New York City, I was in Manhattan, and I'm a dancer myself. Jadakiss had came over and we was over there on Manhattan, and he had asked me a question like, why me? And it's funny because one of his songs that this is Why. That's the song, it's called Why. And if you guys want to look it up on YouTube, just type in Jadakiss and type in Why. And that song will explain why a lot of kids do what they do. But yeah, this is my project. It's great to be up here talking to you guys. I was excited to come through and let you guys know about a little bit about Jadakiss. And thank you, Mr. Steve, for inviting me. And thank you guys for letting me, share about Jadakiss. And enjoy y'all.
I have to tell you, I have so many students just like Ronnie who are finding their voice because of what we're doing at SunEd. I'm really excited that we're able to take a community, so many kids that have struggled through the several years of school and are now actually feeling successes and being able to stand up here and talk to people they don't even know with pride. So thank you very much for asking us to come. We really appreciate it. Please keep spreading the word. Project-based learning and finding the whys is the way to go.
Those of you who have a smartphone right now, we all have the power of one click. We can go to facebook.com and then you put in the student is the class. And there's a web page there. We need some more likes on it. So if you've got a mobile phone, Wi-Fi here is open. You can make a click. Thank you very much. Do you have anything else to say, Mr. Caring Professor? That's the end of the evening. Thank you so much for showing up. We got someone in the audience.
I just want to give one more round of applause to the panelists for sharing all their wonderful insight.
Welcome to this special edition on education. The need to transform public education is one of the most important initiatives today to facilitate the empowerment of students and educators to engage in productive 21st century learning environments. Our honored guests are Mr. Robert Runcie, the Superintendent of Broward County Public Schools. It is the largest fully accredited district in the country and the nation's 6th largest public school district, serving over 750,000 students in more than 300 schools. Joining us also is Abraham Fischler, President Emeritus of Nova Southeastern University and former Chairman of the Broward School Board, who will discuss future plans and the challenges in education following these messages.
We're with Robert Runcie, Superintendent of Broward Schools, and Dr. Abe Fischler, President Emeritus of Nova University, and Dr. Cindy Burfield. A pleasure and privilege to have you all with us here today.
All right, it's a pleasure to be here.
Good to be here.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask you, sir, Mr. Runcie, if I may begin with you. Tell us a little bit about the 3-year plan that Broward County has at the present time.
Well, the 3-year plan for Broward County Schools is focused on positioning this district to produce exceptional student outcomes for our students in the 21st century. We recognize that the education model and practices that got us to where we are today are not the same that we'll need to succeed in the future. The world has changed in a significant way. One, just from globalization and technology has fundamentally changed the requirements for talent in the marketplace. Our students need to graduate with a different set of skill sets that are focused on developing critical thinking skills, ability to solve problems, the ability to work and collaborate with others, and communicate their ideas effectively. That context needs to occur on a global level as our students compete, not just here in Florida, not just in the United States, but around the world. The other challenge that we know that's out there is that in the United States, and in Florida in particular, the context for public education has changed from one where we no longer are a monopoly, if you will. We have competition from charter schools. Charter schools, I believe, will ultimately make us better through competition because it's going to force us to really compete, not only based on outcomes, but even things as simple as our customer service. Our customers, our parents have options, and we need to recognize that. Finally, in a world of tight finances where everybody's watching every penny, we have to make sure that we can do more with the dollars that we have and take that to the greatest extent possible. And so our focus on the financial side is to continue to work our business model in this district so we can invest in what we know matters, our teachers and our students. That's ultimately where the rubber meets the road. And so that's where we're moving for the next several years. There are three components to the strategic plan for the district. First is high quality instruction. That's the focus of what we do. Everything needs to be aligned to that. Secondly is continuous improvement. We need to get better and better every day, every week, every month, every year in everything we do, from what we're doing in the classroom to how we deliver services to how we clean our schools, all aspects of our operations. And then finally, we got to do a better job of communicating the great things that are going on in Broward County. We have exceptional set of teachers. Student achievement is phenomenal in this district. We know there are areas where we need to do better, but I can tell you there's a lot of exciting things going on in this district, some of the leading things in the country. And just a couple minutes to walk through the major component which I am so heavily focused on, which is high quality instruction. Several things there. One is we have got to get better at prioritizing our resources and programs in schools. We have developed in public education a compliance culture, a culture where everyone's kind of looking for the silver bullet program to basically get things done. We've got to limit the number of programs and things that we actually put in schools, and we've got to prioritize what works. The other piece is alignment. If you look starting at the federal government, down to state government, down to local schools, there are a whole bunch of competing policies, programs that really aren't aligned and create disconnects that negatively impact our ability to execute on a local level. So we're going to work really hard to ensure that as we implement Common Core standards, which moves us from a world where it's not just about memorizing content or just building your understanding of content, it's about how you can apply what you know to solve problems. So Common Core sets a whole different set of expectations and standards in terms of what instruction looks like in a classroom, and we need to move to a more personalized learning model. We need to align the professional learning that we give our teachers around that as well. And we have a lot of professional development. It's all over the place. It needs to be strategically focused, and we need to make sure that we clearly understand the difference between participating in professional development and professional learning. I can sit in classes and curriculum and get my certifications all day, but am I really learning, and is that translating into different results in the classroom? And finally, we know we have challenges with the assessment and accountability systems in the state. We're trying to move to Common Core, but we have a legacy assessment system that's based on FCAT. So alignment is pretty critical. And third, I would say technology has to finally come of age in public education. It's still at the periphery. You know, we'll have smart boards, we'll have projectors, kids are using PowerPoint, Excel, et cetera, but the fact of the matter is it's not integrated in a seamless way in the education process where students are using technology to drive the pace of their learning, to engage and control what they're actually doing, and develop personalized learning experiences in the classroom. And that can happen, the technology can drive a lot of that. So I spent some time really talking about the instructional piece because it's pretty critical. There are other initiatives we have going on in the other couple areas, but that's the biggest one.
That's the most important one.
Yes, absolutely.
When are we able to revamp much of what we teach to what students want to learn?
This year we are launching a very exciting initiative called a Digital 5. And our initial thought was we wanted to equip all of the 5th grade classrooms, the students and the teachers across the entire district with technology, tablets and or computers, and provide digital content, digital curriculum, digital experiences, digital assessments, create an environment where students control the pace, the path of their learning in a very personalized way. We're going to impact about 3,000 students, probably about a third of the 5th grade classrooms across the district. It will be and establish a vision of how technology can be used to develop real personalized learning environments, and we're pretty excited about that, and we'll start that at the opening of school this year.
I'd like to ask you a question, Dr. Burfield. How do you find the implementation of this?
Oh, I think it's fantastic. I've heard of the Digital 5, where you have the technology there, and what about the training that goes along with it?
You know, that's a great question. You're absolutely critical. Technology can't run itself. At the end of the day, the success of any technology that's out there and its true ability to impact education is going to be a function of how the teachers embrace it, how they adapt to it, and how they use it. And my experience has been it takes approximately 6 months, maybe a little longer, for teachers to fully adjust to this new method. So this first year, I think we're going to see some good outcomes, but you know, we're going to set appropriate expectations. I think it's, you know, it's going to bring us to where our teachers came into public education. They really want to teach. I don't think they want to spend the majority of their time trying to help students figure out how to answer questions on a bubble sheet exam to get a certain score. I think if we give our students the skills, they'll do well on any assessment that's out there. So I think this is a critical time in the history of this country. We have huge dropout rates in this country, 1.2 million students dropping out every year. We have a huge gap in the workplace. We have 3 million jobs that are going unfilled, yet we have an unemployment rate that exceeds 8%. So that skills gap is definitely prevalent in those two statistics. So we've got to make a fundamental shift in where we are. I firmly believe that the future of this country is not going to be determined any longer based on, you know, how extensive our factories are and how many factories we have, or who's got the greatest amount of military equipment and weapons of mass destruction. Is going to be about who has the strongest education system. Yes. And though that country is going to be the economic superpower of the 21st century. I think America can get there, but we're starting to fall behind. We need to invest in education right now. We need to put the right leadership in our districts at all levels, and we need to have a relentless focus on supporting teachers, building their capacity, and delivering new instructional methods in our classroom. And I think those conversations are going to get us to two things. One is going to get us a list of priorities of what we need to focus on to support the schools. Secondly, it's going to give us a list of things that we need to stop doing because we've got to change what we've done.
And sometimes too much is too much.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's not easy, but it's not easy.
It's not easy.
Higher education.
It's hard to ask people who've been doing some things for a long time, hey, should we stop what you're doing? But I tell you what, the principals know they're accountable for outcomes in the school, and I look at this as a war.
But not FCATs only.
Right, not FCATs only, right? Yes. You know, the war for public education is absolutely going to be fought on a front line. And we need to recognize that the way you fight wars is by letting the people that are on the front line call the shots. You look at how we deal with Afghanistan, Iraq. The soldiers
call in airstrikes, they call in resources in real time. They don't send a note back to a general 5 miles back and wait for a few hours till it gets up to the front.
Both of you share, among many other things, the vision of transforming education. Dr. Fischler forever has been writing on this, and in fact, you as well. How do you see the future with regard to transforming education, Dr. Fischler?
He's talking about it. It's easy for us to talk about it. It's going to take a couple of years. My first question was, what would you like to see in 5 years? He said he's showing you what he hopes to have in 3 years. Every school where kids are involved in learning, developing the skills of the 21st century, knowing where information is, knowing how to process it, and not expecting somebody to have the information to give them, even though he could ask. When they ask me a question, I always tell them, where do you think you can go to find out?
Right.
What tools do you need? You weren't here when I spent 3 years convincing the school board to spend money to put internet into every classroom. $144 million. I thought we'd be much further along
than we are now. Yeah,
that took 2 years just to get them to approve it.
Yeah, unfortunately, what happens is, you put a lot of this infrastructure and you put these tools in, and then what happens is people tend to figure out how to mold all that to their current way of doing business. Right. So you really don't get any change. Yeah, I get you all this technology, smart board into a whiteboard, right? You're not doing a lot of the same things.
It's true.
But, to be fair to a lot of folks, unless you give people the opportunities and the space to learn and psychological safety, if you will, to begin to change from what they're doing, it becomes a challenge.
They need to make mistakes
that's the best way to learn.
Yes.
It really is.
It's a parallel. We have teachers who have been out there and who are great teachers, but the type of pedagogy has to change. So to give them that space and to let them have a little bit of a rope to play around with it is the same type of learning that we're asking the kids to do. So then they can experience it. Situated learning theory says, let me experience it firsthand, and then I can understand how I can apply it.
So what's your sense among your colleagues, teachers that are out there dealing with a lot of these challenges every day? I know there's a lot that's being thrown at teachers, a lot of expectations. In addition to all the things we've talked about, we've changed your world now that is pay for performance model coming out. We're going to try to be as fair in that as we can. I'm trying to get a sense of how our teachers are gravitating and trying to really move down this future.
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier when you talked about how hopefully we'll try to look at what we're doing and look at all these top-down inputs and ask the principals in the schools what's working and what do we need to kind of push to the side so we can narrow our focus, so we can all work together as a school to accomplish the goals that we need to and to become a learning community.
Let me play the devil's advocate. The federal bureaucracy is now put more pressure on teachers based on student performance as the federal government sees it.
Yes.
Because all of a sudden, if the students are not doing well on an examination, then the teacher is being punished.
And those
and the
examinations
school
are
is
changing
being
them.
judged
Yes.
not on some of the skills that he's talking about, but on how they respond to the questions that they're being asked.
Right.
And so if the test is measuring content knowledge
versus skills mastery is different.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. So he's talking much more process, while the federal bureaucracy can't control that.
Yes. They're struggling with the new tests that they're rolling out.
Well, they're not even, you're talking about the PARC assessment?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a sense that, PARC is just not going to make it on time. It's going to be out in the parking lot still.
PARC is going to be
Yeah, it's just, and so the question is, what are you going to have in the interim? To continue with a legacy system that had a purpose at a certain point in time, FCAT, I just really think that's unacceptable. So I think we need to start looking around the world even and see what we can borrow. There's probably other things that we have here in the United States that we can leverage. There's some talk about leveraging the College Board assessments, for example, right? Where, we've got SATs, ACTs, PSATs, Should we use that as a base and expand on that, at least for the college and career readiness piece?
Sure.
There's never been, in my view, a really strong assessment for K through 2. Right? We really focus on the first major year of testing, which is 3rd grade, and the reality is that these formative years of real early childhood, early learning years are the ones that we really need to have a huge impact so that those students are on the right trajectory. And that's been kind of pushed to the background by our system. So hopefully as we go forward that we're going to pay a lot of attention to getting kids better prepared before they show up for school, and then when they're in pre-K, kindergarten, 1st, 2nd grade, that we're doing the best job possible, because if we set the right foundation for them, it's going to be, a whole different world when they get into the middle grades in high school.
Yes, I agree.
You see it when you come to watch the university school, where we started at that preschool, creating that school, 0 to 5. Those kids, when they come to 1st grade, they're reading and they're writing and they're finished with Dean's blocks and all of the things.
And they have these inquisitive minds. They're just out there wanting to learn.
Yeah, in my sense, going back to your first question, where do we see things, a few years from now? But it's my hope to continue this work, this journey, this mission that we're on, to create a whole new generation of students. And it's going to take a whole generation, cycle. The students that are coming in the system now, where are they going to be 10 years from now, 12 years from now, is something that we should see. It looks totally different than where we're at today. In the meantime, we got to make sure that we're doing right by the students that we have in our system today. Across the board, our students that are struggling, students that are gifted. We have over 30,000 exceptional needs students in the district. We believe that we can do a better job servicing all of them, so we're going to actually do a comprehensive review of our operations and how we deliver services, everything from our IEPs to how we execute against those IEPs. We need to get better at that. And I think, if you really want to talk about personalized learning, there's no group of professionals that have actually done it better than our special education teachers. And so I think a lot of the practices they have can actually benefit the entire the entire pedagogical process and all students.
Yes. All their strategies. We use those strategies in the regular. The district is doing a lot of good stuff with STEM and science.
Oh, yeah. I spent 50 years of my life because I started off as a science teacher. And I found, and I found out, I said to myself, science is a verb, it's not a noun. They don't have to know about thallophytes and bryophytes and all that stuff, because that's what we were teaching in the biology. Now I'm 85.
It took all that time, but
Yeah, we got to move faster than that in this century. The pace of
I'm delighted you're here. I really am. And we needed somebody who came out from a different viewpoint.
But I'm really excited to build off of the legacy, Dr. Fischler, that you've established here.
Well,
and really the community is really indebted to your contributions in education, both in our K-12 system as well as the colleges. I mean, you've got a K-20 mindset, and you've been living that. So you almost can't talk about education in Broward County without talking about Dr. Fischler.
Well, I'm delighted that you're here and picking up and moving forward.
Trying our best.
Well, I want to thank you so very much for being with us today. Real pleasure. Abe, I can't reach.
Good to see you. That's all right. That's all right.
We're here in Orlando at the Convention Center for the FETC conference. We'll be hearing the speech by Dr. Abram Fischler, President Emeritus and founder of Nova Southeastern University, following these messages.
I read Life Extension magazine to keep abreast of medical discoveries that can literally save my life. Life Extension's track record dating back to 1980 shows they are decades ahead of conventional medicine in identifying proven methods to prevent and treat the diseases of aging. Reading Life Extension magazine will empower you to take control over your health and longevity. And as a special favor to me, the Life Extension Foundation will give a free 1-year subscription to anyone today. Just call the number on this screen to obtain your free Life Extension subscription. There's no cost, no obligation, just the opportunity to discover solid options to live longer and better. Call the number on the screen today to start receiving Life Extension magazine each month.
Take charge of your health. Get your free subscription to Life Extension magazine now by calling toll-free 1-800-509-9117 or visit www.lef.org.
We started with a blank slate, and then we added you. Because you wanted a tablet that felt perfect in your hands. Dual cameras so you can capture everything. You wanted Beats audio. And a tablet that runs Android, the most popular mobile operating system in the world. Introducing the Slate 7 from HP, the game-changing 7-inch Android tablet. Because for you, getting it exactly right matters.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Fischler.
Thank you all for coming. I'm trying something a little different, and if it works, he'll get all the credit. Mr. Perrick's back there. If it doesn't work, it's my fault. So we start off with that. I also would like to introduce Dr. Cindy, who has been working with them. And I have a guest here today whose book I just finished this week. She deserves a real round of applause. Give it to her. She asked me if I could write a foreword for her, and I said I would only do it if she let me read the manuscript. And the manuscript was on my desk, and I did read it the other night, and I was amazed. So I had a pile of other things that I was going to do, but I never got to them because I wouldn't put down the book. I find that after being in education for over 50 years, that I realize that it's going to take a movement, a true movement, of educators and parents and public to understand that we can't have a third of our students not even finishing high school, that we can't continue to run classes like we do, where time is fixed and all students get educated within a fixed time, and if they don't quite do what we wanted them to do, they have to repeat the year. All of those kinds of things have prevented us from really helping students achieve what each one can achieve. And it's been a long fight for me, shorter for some few in the audience here, but the time has come. And the time has come because technology provides a series of tools for the first time that will enable us to go to where I would like to see us, that each child is the class. She uses the term transformation. She's absolutely right. We have to have a transformation take place in American public education if we're going to be able to educate every child of every parent to be employable. And that becomes part of an economic problem because, as you can see, the large unemployment finds us giving away money for no services. And I came through the 30s, and it was WPA and a CCC, and people had to work to receive the kinds of sources of money that we now just automatically give to people who are unemployable. So the time has really come for us to look at education, both in an economic way and in a social way, because change is inevitable if we're going to be a true democracy in an environment that's economically viable. So I begin by looking at what my good friends, both here and in the back and sitting, have done for me. They actually put together the slide presentation. I saw it this past Monday when it was completed. I will try to fit my comments in the time frame that will enable us to have some questions before we have to leave. So let's look at the big picture. What you're seeing is a stunning display of the variety and depth of Americans at work, creating the products and services of our present and future. Education and training in all fields is what enables knowledge and productivity. Competencies. We take lessons learned and the best practices from all over the world and implement them in many jobs. Competent people and the right tools produce quality performance. That's what's needed now and for the future. Thank you very much. Note the classes which we started with 30 and 40 students in a class sitting in rows like you're sitting here, and the teacher trying to accommodate the cross-section of the population. There's a set of books that I wrote, which was published by Holt, Reinhardt, and Winstead back in the 60s, when I was trying to get science taught as a verb and not a noun. In those books, I didn't tell them what the answer was to questions like, what color did you get? And even in the teacher's manual, I didn't answer that question because I never knew what the student might pour more acid or more base into the solutions, and therefore the color would change. But what they would learn is that a slight increase in acid or base would in fact change colors, and that was important. Our whole world has changed. It's now far more technologically oriented with the internet, Google, Yahoo, etc., so that the world comes together through technology, and we now can speak to people almost anywhere in the world if they have some technology. And what we're going to try to get to is that each student is the class. The student is the class. And therefore, we have a continuous progress type of program where students learn at a rate which will enable each student to succeed because we're varying time. In the old system, time was fixed and we varied grades based on student performance. Now, that's not the case. Now we have the opportunity to have individual students or small groups of students working, and we vary the time they're on task and therefore give each student the opportunity to succeed. Globalization has leveled the competitive playing fields between industrial and emerging market countries. Obviously, All countries will be making some progress, but again, at different rates, depending upon their systems. Education is, in fact, about the economy. It feeds educated students who perform well into the job market, thus increasing the ability of the job market to utilize the technology which is being created by countries all over the world. That becomes part of the global economy, the transference of technology and information to one another, therefore leveling the differences between those countries which are producing and which countries are utilizing the technology produced elsewhere. It is really part of the market economy. Technology is influencing our schools. However, it's a series of patchwork within the framework of the traditional environments. We now must go out and change the organization and structures in the schools themselves so that the real world becomes part of the educational environment. If you look at the classrooms of yesterday, they will not be quite the same as the classroom of today, but we have not changed the organization and structure of the school so that we tend not to have to interface with the technology we now have available to build individuals capable of working in the global economy. We tend to put the technology aside, and we still have students in rows connected verbally to a teacher, but the real connection to the real world around the clock in real time is not yet integrated into the fabric of the instructional processes. When they get to school, they power down instead of powering up. In fact, just recently there was an article where the students are being asked to shut off their mobile technology and put it aside so that it do not interfere with the lessons within the classroom, instead of asking them to tune up their technology and have it integrated into the fabric of the instructional process. School still begins in September. Classes are mostly teacher-directed. We have 3 reading groups, 2 math groups, and then the students have science and social studies, usually within projects. We have to begin to integrate the instructional technology into the fabric of the learning environment so that teachers have time to spend with individual students that have questions, students that need additional motivation, students who have to integrate other sources of learning tools in order to acquire the knowledge and the skills that are necessary. They teach science through reading rather than through the experimental approaches to problem solving. Science is a verb. It is not a noun. The noun is the outcome of the application of the verb science to the problem solvings which scientists engage in. We have to make the classroom more like that real environment where learning takes place from unknown to known through the experimentation put on by students. Science is taught as a noun because most elementary school teachers don't have the background to have to teach science as a verb. Thus, they use the textbook as a source of information rather than a source that stimulates inquiry. High school now uses National Science Foundation developed courses and science programs designed to fit within a teacher-directed class structure, integrated within the fabric of the prose within the framework of the class. There is the opportunity for students to engage in true inquiry. However, each student is unique, and various learning skills and intellectual abilities have to be brought to bear as they become more scientific and aware of what we're trying to accomplish within the classrooms. To have each student as a class means we're going to vary time, we're going to vary the degrees of difficulty so that students have the opportunity to succeed and get the reward that teachers provide for those students who can do the work within that framework. We can't just use time as a fixture anymore, because within that framework, the only thing we can do is give A to Fs, and that is not the reward system. What we have to do is provide a vehicle for rewarding every student in a continuum of learning so that they are constantly given a reward for what they learn in the time frame that we allow. Students who get an F or a D will likely have a lower opinion of themselves and seek positive reinforcement outside of school. Solutions include technology learning tools, student-centered, personalized learning environments, and teachers aware of where students are on their continuum. We need to transform education. This is a very interesting quote. The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn. And that quote is from Alvin Toffler. Are we preparing our students for this or this? Obviously, through the pictures you're seeing, you will see that we're preparing them for yesterday and not for tomorrow. The idea of a computer for every student is still being promoted. Computers enable students to locate, evaluate, and effectively use information. Here you see a child working with a new tool, more practical than computers at the desk. But there's a student working with a mobile device, which is in fact a computer, and that's how small the computers are getting. Smartphones are relatively small, but offer a limited visual impression. One has to scroll or magnify the content. The future of education is for each student to have a most convenient tool that enables continuous learning anywhere at any time. It's important that the student, when they feel they would like to communicate with someone, they have the ability to do so through the internet and through the clouds that store the materials. If each student is the class, then we have to develop a system that enables a teacher to know where each student is within the curriculum. If each student is the class, we also have to provide alternative ways through which material is provided for the student. By changing the mode of instruction and by changing the way materials are communicated, we try to be able to identify each student's primary style of learning. It's important for us to know this and to be able to provide the material relevant to the student. We know the rate at which each student is learning. We know the materials he or she is assessing, and we have the ability to communicate with each student at any time. It can enable teachers to create online formative assessments and to receive and post assessments daily and give students immediate feedback. Thus, students continue to learn, which is essential for them to continue their progress. Educational processes and practice often limit implementation of new technologies. Personalized learning is not adequately supported at the present time by most academics. Learning and teaching technologies are not utilized by most academics. The tablet is increasingly used as a personalized learning environment. Tablets are not just another laptop. They are a new environment and technology. We need to transform education. Allow me to introduce my systemic change model. What you're looking at is a cube which has 3 faces. You will see that what we have to do is introduce 3 modes of instruction. The self-paced mode, referred to in the literature as computer-assisted instruction or computer-mediated instruction. The second is the tutorial mode, where we organize the class into small groups where students are working on projects, communicating through their technology at home or even in class, etc. And finally, the third mode is this small group which makes a presentation to the rest of the class so that the information is shared as they come to some conclusion within their structure. Now, if you go down to the left side of the cube as you look at it, we have to do things systematically. First, we have to make sure that we take the time to educate the communities within our areas. By communities, I'm talking about teachers, parents, clergy, all the people through which the schools receive and send students, and that's important. Next, we have to change the curriculum so that the 3 types of instructional modes are built into the communication environment of the curriculum. We also have to look at the technology. How can we introduce technology into the fabric of the instructional program and also to monitor the progress of students? The next thing is a student management system. Remember, I had said to you previously, we have to keep track of the students' learning and the methodologies they're using and the continuum that they're proceeding through. Then we have a teacher training. You can't do much without training the teacher to integrate all of the above into the environment where learning takes place. And last, we have to change the organization and structure of the school to accommodate time as a variable and mastery as students progress and achieve the objectives. So you'll see that the bottom, I talk about cost and I talk about time. That depends on the availability of monetary resources to retool the environment to be sure that all of the necessary tools are there. The bottom line is we need to transform education. The bottom line is each student is the class. And I thank you for coming and listening.
Thank you for joining us. Our subject today is about education. President John F. Kennedy said, "Let us think of education as the means of developing our greatest abilities, because in each of us there is a private hope and a dream, which when fulfilled can be translated into benefit for everyone and greater strength for our nation."
There is this counterintuitive concept that most people have to think about before they start to realize that the efficiencies of instructional technologies, the processes, the ability to access information are much more important than just the fact we're using an iPod or an iPhone or a laptop or a video camera or even the internet. Those technologies of instruction allow us to access information. Those tools effective, we need highly qualified, trained people. And it's not just the school teacher, but it's those other individuals, the library media specialists. Most of us remember that librarian, that media specialist.
What you're seeing is a stunning display of the variety and depth of Americans at work, creating the products and services of our present and future. Education and training in all fields is what enables knowledge and productivity. Competencies. We take lessons learned and the best practices from all over the world and implement them in many jobs. Competent people and the right tools produce quality performance. That's what's needed now and for the future.
I'm here with Dr. Abraham Fischler, just to ask a few questions about education. Hi.
Hi. But stick to education and not pharmacy. How's that?
Let's stick to education, of course. I graduated from Nova.
I know that.
And it was such a wonderful experience. And one of the biggest things is the education that I got from Nova. It was very unique. And one of the things that it taught us is, you know, when we go out into the real world, you know, sometimes there's more than what we're taught in school. And I know, as you had mentioned a lot earlier, that education is the key to the future of the minds. And you know, I just wanted to know from a perspective, you know, do you think that there could be more that we could be doing in the education system to prepare, you know, the graduates for the real world? Because it's very, very different.
There's a need for an organic change in the way in which we educate our children from birth through age 22. The way we're set up now, children in preschool have an opportunity to learn by doing. And they play with Dean's blocks and all types of activities, and they learn symmetry in that way and shapes and sizes and things of that nature. But the tendency, as we move up further in the educational system, they become passive learners because teachers want to teach, and students have to learn what they're taught, in many cases through symbols like reading and lecturing, listening, and we have to make sure that that doesn't continue. We have to transform the way we teach so that the environment provides tools through which children can learn. And instead of worrying about the printed word as much as we do, yes, they have to learn to read, but they have to learn that in reading you have to have a certain level of skill, which is analysis and synthesis and self-judgment. We don't spend enough time doing that as much as comprehension, which is the simplest level which we get. They spend a good deal of their time sitting instead of actively learning. So the pictures I just left with Mr. Peretz shows the transformation in the university school of children actively involved in learning by being in small groups, manipulating objects and seeing what happens as you change shapes, and learning geometry by actually doing geometry through the problems that they have to work on. So that has to change. So the teacher becomes a guide in a learning environment, and by manipulating the environment and providing opportunity for students to really teach one another.
Okay. So I completely agree. And, you know, with the mention of manipulating the environment, how does our environment affect the ability of our students to learn? Do you think there's a connection between nutrition, exercise, healthcare as it relates to education?
You're absolutely right. But we don't have to formally learn that in a school environment. If you want an athletic program, students can go out in the yard and work out for a half hour with some supervision, and that's exercising.
Right.
Okay, you can give them puzzles to work on, which exercises the mind, and especially if you have a variety of. That's what geometry does. You can teach geometry through manipulating space and looking at the congruence of space. And the design is all doing that. My wife picks up the newspapers about 10 o'clock in the morning, and she doesn't give it up until 12 because she does all the puzzles, a whole variety of puzzles which come every day.
You're exercising your brain.
And you're
right
exercising your brain. So all those things can be done in an environment which enables students to have the time to achieve rather than achieve at the rate I think they should be learning. So in the model that I have in my head, and which we now are beginning to implement, is that education is a continuum, and it may take you a little longer, or you may be very bright and get there quicker, but we have to provide an environment which is flexible so that the student succeeds. I'll tell you a story, a true story. I took up golf when I retired for 6 months. Okay. I was 65. And one afternoon I was playing with my friends, and I said, think how stupid I am spending 4 hours trying to hit a white ball in a hole. And I wasn't even getting exercise.
Okay.
If I used 4 hours exercising, I would be developing upper body strength and all of these things. Golf doesn't do that for you. It just buys you some freedom. Mm-hmm. But what are you doing with your freedom? You're hitting a white ball in a hole.
Right.
So I stopped.
Okay.
I stopped playing golf that way.
You did?
Yes.
Okay. I work at Life Extension Foundation, which is the largest organization dedicated to investigating every method of extending the healthy human lifespan. If I may ask, what is your secret to staying healthy and so very active?
Staying busy, being productive, have a reason for putting on my pants every morning and getting out of the house so I can do that. The worst thing you can do is retire and not have the two. And so what do I do today? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? How am I going to fill up the day? That's not good. Okay. You really have to have a set of objectives that you're trying to achieve, whether it's in golf, if you're serious, you go out and you do what you have to do, or some other, but you have to have an objective, a reason for getting up, a reason for getting out of the house, a reason for exercising your mind and your body.
Richard told me that you're very conscious about what you eat and how you take care of yourself.
Yeah, because when I was a young man, I went into the service in World War II, and when I came out, I was much heavier than when I went in.
Really?
Yes, much heavier. I gained weight because I was a medic.
Okay.
I was in the operating room as a corpsman and enjoyed it, learned a lot.
Right.
But I also ate a lot.
Okay.
And didn't exercise like I was doing before then. So I decided that I would have to go back and balance my time and leave room to exercise my body as well as I was exercising my mind.
How do you feel about the importance of students understanding the effects of nutrition and how it relates to their education?
It depends on how they learn it.
So do you feel that we should be promoting nutrition, the right foods that will help feed their brains?
I think you should be promoting it through a set of opportunities for students to try new foods, to be selective on the basis of their knowledge of what foods and how to go about selecting food that's both nutritious and tasty.
Of course, that's important.
And you can have the same thing, but you can have 3 ounces instead of 6.
So no French fries.
And no French fries.
No French fries.
You get sweet potato fries.
There you go. That's great.
So what I did was I wanted to bring my weight down again. As you can see, I weigh 168 this morning, and I'm conscious of what I weigh. And when I move up above 170, I ration myself for a couple of days so I can lose the 2 pounds that I put on. So I try to stay between 165 and 170.
That's great. So you're very conscious.
I'm very conscious of the weight problem. And because of the early deaths of my family, I decided I'd live longer, and I've been very successful. Because as you can see at 85, I'm still active every day.
Very active. So you exercise, you eat right, you move daily. I think that's the key.
That is the key.
That is
and
the key.
have a place to work in a productive way.
This has been so interesting. Thank you so much.
Well, it's good meeting you, and keep
Very
up
nice
the good
meeting
work
you. Thank
and
you.
the cause.
With us now is Abram Fischler, President Emeritus of Nova Southeastern University, and Colonel Rainan Gissin, PhD actually. Pleasure and honor to have you on the show again.
Always.
Thank you, Abe.
Good to be back, Richard.
Well, here we are today, experiencing another beautiful year, and the question is, from your respective perspectives, you as a military man from Israel and a PhD, and you as an educator in the United States, how do you see the condition of mankind these days with a view to intelligent solutions from an academic and other point of view?
We go to school.
No.
I'm interested in getting your perspective on them.
I'll tell you something from my own personal experience. When I was a student at Syracuse University, I used to support myself. I got a scholarship, but it wasn't enough. So on Fridays and Saturdays, I used to sing American folk songs in the pubs around Syracuse. And one of my favorite songs at the time, not mine, but the students, was talking about the early 70s, was a song by now a very famous poet, but at the time, one that just burst out. His name was Bob Zimmerman, later known as Bob Dylan. And the song was, "The Times They Are A-Changin'." And there's one prophetic line there in that, which I think, it's really a prophetic song. But there's one prophetic line which applies both to Israel, to the United States, and to the changing world we live in. And he says, there's sort of a warning. He said, you better start swimming or you'll sink like a stone, because the times they are a-changing. So that summarizes most of all. How do you deal, how do governments, how do people, how do institutions deal with a changing environment? The times are changing. The question is, how do governments, how do people, how do institutions deal with change? How are they able to adapt to change, absorb change? And my view of it, in a metaphorical sense, is you have to develop those skills of extreme sports. I would call it surfing on tsunami waves, actually.
It's interesting when you get the information from a group that has their own agenda as well. And you have to understand what they're selecting to broadcast. And what we end up getting is a conflict, for example, in this country, between Channel 7 and Channel 4 and 10. So I watch the 7 o'clock, the 10 o'clock news on 7, and then I go to the 11 o'clock news on 6, so I get both points of view, even though they're talking about the same event.
And speaking of information, a significant percentage of people in the United States don't even know where Washington, D.C. is. So I regard ignorance as a very threatening fact in our world today.
Education in a democracy is very, very important, because your vote and my vote count. And so if you think that this country is miseducating people or not educating them to function in a democracy in the complexity of our world, we're not going to make it. We're not going to make it. So education becomes even more important, and you can't afford to have 30% of the ninth graders not graduating.
There's no doubt that the ability of the United States of America to reinvent itself lies with education.
On that happy note, I'd like to thank you very much for being with us again, Colonel. Thank you, Abe. A pleasure.
My pleasure.
A pleasure meeting you.
Yes, it has been. I'm looking forward to being in your country.
Yeah.